My name is Celestine Dupree. I'm 36 years old. 4 months ago, I was eating lunch at my desk at the title company where I work, and my coworker Janet slid her phone across to show me something funny she'd found in the county recorder's database while clearing a backlog, a property transfer filed 3 weeks earlier, with what she said was the sloppiest notary stamp she'd seen all year. And I looked at the screen and saw my mother's address, my own name as the grantor, and Janet's own stamp on the acknowledgement line, and I sat very still for a long time before I told Janet that she needed to look at the date on that stamp and tell me whether she had any memory of notarizing it. She did not. She had no memory because she had not done it. Someone had used her stamp without her knowledge, which is a crime, on a document transferring my mother's house into my brother's name, which required my signature as co-heir, which I had not given, which is also a crime, and the someone in question was my brother Darnell, who had access to Janet's stamp because he had been in our office 3 weeks earlier, dropping off paperwork for an unrelated closing, and had been left alone in the workroom for approximately 8 minutes while Janet went to get him a copy. 8 minutes. That is how long it took my brother to take something that did not belong to him and attach my name to it. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe if this kind of story is what you come here for, and drop a comment with your city and local time. I read everyone. Let me tell you about my mother's house first, because the house is the whole of it. Loretta Dupree bought that house in 1991 with money she saved over 11 years working double shifts at a hospital laundry in New Orleans. 3 bedrooms, a covered porch, a yard she kept so precisely that neighbors asked her what she used on the grass. She raised Darnell and me in that house. She told us both, separately and together, more times than I could count, that the house was our inheritance, and that when she passed it would go to us equally, and that equally meant we would have to agree on what to do with it together, because she did not want her children divided over property the way she had watched other families divided. She died in January of this year, 71 years old, heart failure, fast and not particularly painful, which was the only mercy in it. Darnell and I sat together at the hospital and then together at the funeral home and then separately in our own grief. And for the first 2 months, we were in the specific day's truce that siblings sometimes find after a parent dies. Too exhausted for conflict, just managing the immediate things. What I did not know during those 2 months was that Darnell had already decided what to do with the house and had decided it without me. He had a buyer, a developer who wanted the lot for a small commercial project, offering $340,000 cash. And Darnell needed money in a way I had not fully understood yet, credit card debt and a truck payment behind, and a girlfriend who had recently moved in and raised his monthly expenses considerably. The developer wanted to close fast. Darnell did not want to wait for me to agree, so he didn't wait. He came to my office on a Tuesday, supposedly to ask me about the probate process since I work in title, and he thought I could advise him informally, and I walked him through the general steps and introduced him to Janet and showed him the workroom where we keep the equipment, and he was gracious and grateful and brotherly in the way he is when he wants something, and I walked him out thinking the visit had been about information. It had been about Janet's notary stamp, which he lifted from the drawer where we keep the office supplies while I was at the printer. 3 weeks later, he filed the fraudulent transfer, forging my signature on a quitclaim deed, using Janet's stolen stamp on the notary line, and the county recorder accepted it because the county recorder does not verify signatures or confirm that notaries actually performed the acknowledgments, they just process what comes in. The house transferred to Darnell's name in the records while I was at my desk doing title work for other people's properties, completely unaware. The developer closed 2 weeks after that. Darnell received $340,000. My share, $170,000, was not sent to me, was not held in escrow, was not mentioned in any communication. As far as the recorded documents were concerned, I had quit-claimed my interest voluntarily, and the transaction was complete. Janet figured it out because she keeps a log of every document she notarizes: date, property address, parties, the way a good notary does. And when she pulled the backlog, she noticed immediately that the stamp date on the filed document did not correspond to any entry in her log. And then she noticed that the property address matched a name she recognized as her coworker's, and that was when she slid her phone across the desk. I called my attorney before I called my brother. Her name is Simone Arsenault, and she has been handling property and estate matters in Louisiana for 20 years, and she told me within the first 5 minutes of the call that what I was describing was deed fraud, criminal impersonation of a notary, and potentially elder estate theft depending on the timeline relative to my mother's death, and that I should not contact Darnell until we had filed the Ellis pendants to freeze any further transfer of proceeds. We filed that afternoon. Simone also filed a complaint with the state's notary commission on Janet's behalf, since Janet's commission had been used without her consent, and she had both a professional obligation and a personal interest in making that clear on the record. Janet, for her part, was furious in the specific professional way that people who take their credentials seriously are furious when someone uses those credentials to commit a crime, and she gave Simone a full written statement and her complete notary log without being asked twice. I called Darnell that evening. I want to describe the call accurately because I think the details matter. He answered cheerfully, the way he answers when he doesn't yet know that the thing he's done has been found. I said his name, and then I said I had a question about the quitclaim deed filed on Mama's house. And the cheerfulness drained out of his voice so completely and so fast that I could almost hear the specific moment he understood what I knew. He tried 3 approaches in approximately 4 minutes. First, he said there must be a mistake in the records. Then he said he had intended to send me my share and had just been managing cash flow. Then he said Mama would have wanted the house handled quickly, and he had made a judgment call on my behalf. I let him finish the third one, and then I told him that a lis pendens had been filed that afternoon, that Simone had already been in contact with the developer's attorney, and that Janet had provided a full statement confirming she had not notarized that document. He did not say anything for a long moment. Then he said my name, not as a question, just as a word, the way you say someone's name when you've run out of everything else. I told him I needed the $170,000 in a certified account within 30 days, or Simone would file the criminal referral she had already drafted. I told him I was not interested in sending my brother to prison, but that I was also not interested in absorbing a $170,000 theft from my mother's estate, because he'd decided his financial problems outweighed my inheritance. I told him the choice was simple, and the timeline was fixed, and I was going to hang up now. I hung up. He transferred the money in 19 days. Not all at once, in 3 transfers, which told me he'd had to liquidate some of the developer proceeds he'd already moved into investments, which told me he had not been planning to pay me at any point, and had arranged his finances on the assumption that the money was gone from my reach. The transfers came with no message, no apology, just 3 notifications from my bank over 4 days. Simone filed a civil complaint regardless, specifically for the fraudulent conveyance, which she said created a public record that mattered independently of whether I'd recovered the money, because a deed fraud that goes into the record without a challenge creates a cloud on the title history that can cause problems for decades. The civil finding, when it came, was clean and specific, and is now part of the permanent property record for my mother's house, which the developer has since built on, though that building will now carry a title history that documents exactly what happened. I have not spoken to Darnell since the call. He sent me a text in the 3rd month that said he was sorry, and that he had been desperate, and that he hoped I could understand. I read it the same way I read every document that comes across my desk, for what it actually says rather than what the person sending it would prefer it to convey. It said he was sorry he got caught. It said he had been desperate, which was true, and which explained the action without justifying it. It said he hoped I could understand, which was a request, not an acknowledgement. I did not respond. Someday I might. I'm not sure yet. What I think about most when I think about this whole thing is my mother's house and what she meant when she said equally. She meant she did not want us divided over property. And we are divided now, not because the house was sold, but because of what my brother believed about me when he made his decision, that I wouldn't notice, that I wouldn't fight, that my understanding of how title and property records work would somehow not apply to my own family's documents. He sat in my office and watched me do this work, and still believed that when it was his hands on the paper, I would be the sister who didn't check. He was wrong about that. He had always been wrong about that. He just never had occasion to find out until he used my coworker's notary stamp in my own workplace and filed it in a county database I look at for a living. The $170,000 is in a separate account. I have not spent any of it yet. I'm going to use some of it to have my mother's porch restored exactly the way she had it, because the developer tore out the covered section for the commercial footprint, and I have photographs of how it looked, and I want there to be a record somewhere, even if it's just in my own home, of the things she built and what it looked like before anyone decided they had the right to transfer it without asking. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear that your name on a document is worth protecting. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.